Hi everyone, thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Leanne Hayes and I'm Head of Client Services here at Will It Make the Boat Go Faster. Running the session today is our co-founder Ben Hunt-Davis and our Director of Consulting Jamie McPherson. You'll be familiar with them if you joined our last webinar. We've got 45 minutes together today and Ben will go through the agenda in a moment. We'll leave time at the end for questions and we're available to stay online for the hour, so we may well extend the session to answer as many as possible. Any we don't get through, we'll respond directly to you afterwards by email as well. And here's how you can get involved. On the right-hand panel, you'll see a handout section where we've uploaded a couple of documents. We'll be referencing the worksheet throughout the session, and it's a resource for you to write down ideas and responses either during or after the session to allow you to put some things into action. I suggest you download the worksheet now so you've got it ready for when the session starts in a minute. You can also find some more information about us and our contact details in the other PDF documents. To ask questions to us throughout the session, simply type them into the text box. They're only visible to us and to the individual that has submitted them. And as I said, we'll cover as much as we can at the end of the session and then we'll respond individually afterwards. At the end of the session, a feedback form will appear in your browser. We'd really appreciate it if you could spend a couple of minutes to fill that out. You'll also receive a recording of this webinar by email too, and we'll send that at the end of today via Ben's email address. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Ben and Jamie to start the session.
Thank you very much, Leanne. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I know that quite a few of you have been on some of our Will It Make the Boat Go Faster webinars before, so welcome back. And I think from the sign-ups, about a third of you are new, haven't done anything with Will It Make the Boat Go Faster before, so a very warm welcome. And the content we're going to be going through today is going to be different from the two previous webinars we've been through. And if you want more information on what we've done before, so kind of first webinar about maintaining performance through adversity, and then kind of how to be a high-performing virtual team. If you'd like any more information on those recordings of those webinars, then please let us know at the info@ email address. So, by way of introduction, as Leanne said, I'm Ben Hunt-Davis, one of the co-founders of Will It Make the Boat Go Faster. I used to be a sportsman. I was a rower. I've been involved in 6 Olympic Games, 3 as a competitor, doing pretty badly in the first 2, and then the third one worked out well, which was good.
Bit better.
Yeah, it was good. We won, and then the following 3 Olympics, I've been involved with as kind of part of the leadership team for Team GB. I've got kind of practical experience of leadership through kind of business, but also running world rowing events, kind of with 18 months set up, building up teams of 500 people to run a certain event. So I've got a certain amount of experience in that. I spent the last 18 or so years working in as a consultant, looking at leadership teams, performance generally. I've written a book called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster, and Tom Barry and I started this business 8 or so years. Thank you very much, Jamie. Started this business 8 or so years ago, and we're a kind of high performance consultancy. We help organizations kind of develop their leadership capability, their team capability, and help everybody perform at a higher level. So Jamie, do you want to say a few words of introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Jamie, Director of Consulting for Will It Make the Boat Go Faster. Been connected with Will It for the last 5 years. My background is 20 years working in the people personal development space, UK, US, EMEA, with global clients like Microsoft and Coca-Cola. I originally came into this world trained as a sports psychologist, and I've kept that going in parallel with all my corporate work. So when I was in the States, I provided sports psych support to the women's American rowing squad leading up to 2008 Olympics, which was a fascinating experience. And I'm really interested in how leadership affects bottom line performance, helping leaders make the link between what they do and how that feeds through to the actual bottom line performance of the organization, because often there's a time lag, and helping create that kind of sense of activity into results, I think, is a really interesting subject, which we're going to share some thoughts on today. One thing to say, Ben's already mentioned it, Leanne's mentioned it, we'd love you to get involved. We've already had some questions, which is fantastic, and we'll do our best during the course of the conversations to answer them, but also the time at the end. But if you've got questions or you've got comments, please type them in. We'd love to kind of engage in that way.
Great. Thank you very much, Jamie. over the last 3-4 weeks, we have run a number of workshops with senior leadership groups, kind of helping them look at kind of direction and then kind of put the plans in place so they can actually deliver, looking at kind of how do they perform as virtual high performing teams. And we've run numerous one-to-one leadership workouts with kind of friends of the business. And it's been really interesting talking to people from so many different industries, because the industries we've been talking to people from have varied from insurance to house building, from payments to parcel delivery, law to technology, outsourcing to aviation. And some industries and some organizations are obviously thriving and some are struggling. But what seems to be very common across organizations is a lot of people are knackered. A lot of people are really, really exhausted. And that's probably down to a few things, partly the pace of change. And Jamie will kind of talk a bit about kind of why we get tired going through change a bit later. But kind of the pace of change, about the changes of routine, about just running as fast as you can to pivot your business so you can do something different. And one thing that is very clear, that is, if you want to have a positive impact on other people, you've got to be in a position to be able to do that. And you know, one flat battery can't charge another. You need to make sure you're looking after yourself as leaders first and foremost, so that you can lead people the way you want to lead them. So that's kind of been kind of interesting to look at. Kind of other things that have come through. Kind of the communication, how leaders are communicating at the time seems to be critical. We had a kind of leadership workout with somebody a couple of days ago who was talking about, from an insurance company, who was saying that the senior team have almost disappeared. They've kind of gone silent. And the challenge with that is, if leadership aren't sure quite how to communicate and go silent, everybody else will fill the gap with other stuff that probably isn't that helpful. And leaders within an organization are generally the people with kind of time and experience and knowledge on their side. And I think sometimes we've got to back ourselves to really take a lead. And so much of leadership now is a consensual, collegiate approach, bringing everyone along. However, the people who have been really effective in the last few weeks have, in times of crisis, in times of change, stepped forward and said, this is what we're going to do, and provided clarity. And the title of this webinar, steering your team through the unknown. Part of the role of leadership is to provide clarity and what's known, to try and decrease the amount of stuff that's unknown and increase what we do know. So leaders need the ability to step forward, to communicate incredibly clearly, and to provide space and certainty for everybody else to follow. So it's kind of been really interesting looking at what's happened. And for us as an organization, we've got a number of leadership ingredients we look at in the courses and programs and workshops we run. Today, we're only going to touch on a few of them. Clearly we can't go into everything. So we're only going to touch on a few of the ingredients. Kind of the first ingredients, Leanne, if you can just pop the next one up, please. Kind of the first ingredients we're going to have a look at is about kind of exciting others to achieve goals. So, how do we set a clear vision that can excite and engage people to follow? We're going to look at the balance between kind of the crazy goals and then kind of being organized enough so we know clearly what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and that provides a level of certainty and knowledge around what we're doing. And then we're going to look at a bit at kind of high performance conversations. We won't do the kind of feedback bit today, but it's kind of part of the high performance conversations, so we can communicate really clearly in order for people to achieve their goals. So that's kind of the outline of what we're going to do. In terms of the agenda, what we'll do is we'll kind of step through. So I'll deal with, Jamie will deal with the first bit rather about kind of change. I'll kind of look at the bits around engaging, creating engaging goals, and the dialogue bit, kind of conversations. Then Jamie will take over again for kind of exciting and energizing others. And then, as both Jamie and Leanne said, there's time at the end for questions, but please ask questions as we go through. And John and Dan, we will come to your questions as you've already submitted them. So thank you very much for that. What I would love it if you could do is just type into the question bar at the moment, just what are the greatest challenges you're facing as leaders at the moment? It would be great to get some input, and we'll kind of see what we can do to come back and answer as many points as possible. So I'm going to keep going, but please it'd be great to hear what kind of the greatest challenges you're facing are at the moment. So, and the worksheet, there is a worksheet there, as Leanne said. Please make sure, theory and ideas are great, but actually it's application that is totally critical. So we want you to be able to take stuff away and apply it to your business. So use a worksheet to help with application. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Jamie to move on to talk about change. Jamie, over to you.
Thanks, Ben. So going to spend a bit of time exploring helping people deal with change and getting on the front foot. I think, Ben, you said change is a constant. In the business life we've been operating in for the last 20 years, we always hear people talk about the pace of change. So dealing with change is kind of known. I think what's specific, particularly about the last 4 to 6 weeks, has been that change has been forced upon us. We have had to change our life, our work, everything about how we live our lives dramatically in the last 4 to 6 weeks. And we thought it would be helpful to talk about essentially the kind of the science bit around change. So how does that affect us physiologically? So for those of you who can remember, this is like the L'Oreal shampoo adverts where I talk about the science bit. The first, I guess when we think of change within Willitt, we think of 3 stages of change. The first stage of change is around essentially kind of habit and routine. So kind of as a story to illustrate that, have you ever had, probably pre-lockdown because we're driving our cars a bit less, but that situation you've driven home from work and you get home and you go, sort of thinking back to the journey and you're like, do you know what? I don't remember going around that really gnarly, busy roundabout, which is kind of a bit edgy. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. Often for a lot of us, we can kind of identify with that story. That is an example of us operating in our brains at habit and routine level. It's all happening from the basal ganglia in the center of the brain. It's very, very energy efficient, and it's almost the way that we evolve when we learn anything. When we deal with change, we're moving towards a situation where we become automatic about things. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 in terms of change, we like to call it healthy change. You're using a different part of your brain. You're using what we call the prefrontal cortex. This is the last piece of the evolutionary jigsaw puzzle. This is the logical part of our brain. Good example of this, have you ever been in a long business meeting for 4 or 5 hours, been discussing, talking about different things that could happen, analysing data, looking at options? You come out of the meeting, even though you've been sitting down all day, you come out going, I'm exhausted. You might have a bit of a headache in the front of your forehead. That is because when we use that part of the brain, when we are dealing with some degree of difference, it's energy intensive. It's really, really tiring. So that's the kind of second level of change. And then the third level of change, which may well be more prevalent right now for us as leaders and for our people, is what we would call excessive change. During times of massive uncertainty, a different part of the brain gets involved, what's called the amygdala. And you might have had a situation where in kind of pre-lockdown, a classic would be things haven't gone well at work, you're under pressure, there's lots of stuff to do, you're starting to feel like you can't quite cope, you want to get home, and there's a car driving in front of you and it's a bit slower, and you kind of have this emotional reaction to it, which doesn't fit their crime. It's like it's out of proportion with what's happened. And you probably have what's called an amygdala hijack, which is essentially our flight or fight response, which is a sense of, do you know what, we feel a bit of threat right now. We are struggling to deal with the current situation. Right now, I'm in the garden shed and I go back into the house when I finished work, and if it's been stressful or difficult, then suddenly my children might be going, oh, daddy, which is lovely, but because I've got too much going on, I can find myself being kind of more emotional in terms of trying to manage all sorts of different things. That's the third state of change. And that state of change is actually quite negative because you're kind of stuck in a past and you're dealing with quite negative feelings. As leaders, what we know is that there are some key learns from this. So number 1, we are wired to be dealing with habit and routine. So in fact, change is always going to be a bit of a challenge for us. Either it's going to be tiring or actually it's going to create emotional kind of responses. Number 2, in terms of thinking about change, particularly from a leadership perspective, it's actually normal and okay to kind of feel these emotional reactions. The emotional reactions come from our kind of prehistoric emotional brain. It was helpful in terms of running away from lions and tigers. It's not quite so helpful now, but it's completely normal. The third piece, I think, which is critical, which speaks to this title of celebrating the discomfort, is as leaders for ourselves and for other people, being able to identify and make sense of those feelings for ourselves and for our teams is really useful and necessary for people to start to look forward rather than kind of being stuck in the past. So those leaders who can kind of surface those feelings and then the beliefs that drive those negative feelings give greater opportunity to start thinking about, well, actually, how do I change some of those beliefs and how do I drive a sense of moving forward rather than being stuck where we are currently. If we can't do that, then we can't start to change. I think a key piece here is around, as well, because we're talking about emotions, about being authentic. I think a key piece is articulating rather than being those emotions, but working through that is key. Because when we move to the future, it's we can start to look forward. There are fantastic opportunities and benefits that exist. So in terms of leaders and change, the second piece is having helped make sense of that emotion for people. You need to start looking forward. And for us, there are three things that you can do. Number one, start to look at, having thought about emotions, what might be the opportunities of this situation? And Ben's talked about some of the conversations we've had. We're working with a law firm and they talked about, do you know what, right now, having to work virtually, we had a 3-year plan to work virtually. That was our plan. The opportunity right now is, can we get that done much more quickly? So instigating change, getting on the front foot, that's a real opportunity. Stage 2 is, having identified some opportunities, how could we convince ourselves and others around that change? So what might be the benefits to the business, to me as a leader, to others in my team around working virtually? And they've talked about, do you know what? If we can work virtually and get this done, there might be, we might need to have less office space. That might mean that our margins and our profitability could go up. That's a fantastic opportunity. Secondarily, for individuals, they don't have to commute as much. So there are benefits to these, new scenarios and new possibilities. The third area, once you've instigated and recognized opportunities, once you've convinced yourself and others of some of the benefits, how do you go about making that change more easy? How do you maybe exaggerate some of those behaviors and actions? So A, it makes it impossible for us not to. And secondarily, it helps us hit the ground running going into that new future. So they've talked about, which is really interesting, I don't know quite how long lockdown will go for, maybe hopefully 2 or 3 more weeks, it might be longer. But they've talked about we should stay in lockdown and work virtually for 3 months. Because I think in 3 months, we can really master virtual working. We can tick off this 3-year goal strategy we've had, and we can spend our time focusing on other things. So for us, I guess there are 2 key parts to dealing with change. Number one, surfacing the feelings, thinking about the beliefs that might be driving those negative feelings and helping people work through those so that they can look forward. And then in looking forward, actually going, what are the opportunities? What are the benefits? How do we exaggerate that so we can hit the ground running? One story quickly to illustrate that, working with a procurement business, they were 3 months into a 12-month plan to hit a particular number. Then their parent company came in and said, after 3 months, we need you to go 30% higher on the numbers. So profitability and turnover. Their senior leader got his top 35 people together and he said, we need to deal with this. Can I just explain how I've been feeling over the last week about this? Because I've known for a week. I've been angry, I've been annoyed, I've been pissed off. I've had sleepless nights. I've been doing emails and then thinking, no, I can't send those emails. But I've actually worked through that and I've thought about it. And actually, there are some opportunities here. And actually, I believe that we can still hit these new numbers. But what I want you guys to do now is share some of your concerns about that. Let's listen to them, hear them, and then let's start to think about what the opportunities are. And within the course of a couple of hours, that top 35 had turned from being kind of rabbit in the headlights to actually really looking forward and really being up for the challenge. So for us, emotions, then looking forward and celebrating the discomfort is key. And the great thing about the instigating change, convincing others to get on board and making change easy, is you're starting to think about some of the detail which can sit behind what could be a great new plan or set of goals for you going forward. So I am now going to hand to Ben, who might be that way, or he might be that way, depending on your camera, and he's going to talk about goals. Except I need to talk about the worksheet. We've got the worksheet. Sorry, apologies. So just quickly, worksheet, questions for you to think about in terms of change. And I guess this is focused on looking forward. Maybe list for your own context, what are 10 possible opportunities that might arise from the situation you're in? We say 10. Why we say 10 is, yes, it's quite a large number. There might be 4 or 5 which aren't really that helpful, but there might be 4 which are really, really good opportunities, and identify which of those are most interesting. Secondarily, looking forward, what might be the upsides of each of those opportunities which are really interesting, and what might be benefits for other people. And then lastly, what around some of those opportunities, what actions could you take that might exaggerate or really help accelerate that change so you make good progress? Apologies, I should have remembered the worksheet. Useful thing to do in terms of thinking about things, in terms of making sense of change. Ben, over to you to talk about goals.
Thanks, Jamie. So yeah, creating energized goals. So we've had kind of quite a few comments and questions, and thank you very, very much. With people talking from kind of morale and motivation, kind of working smarter, not just harder, about kind of some people go on, there's too many challenges to mention, kind of lack of human interaction. There are all sorts of different things coming up, including quite a lot about kind of certainty, the uncertainty, certainty bit, and kind of direction. And Dan, I think you sent a question in earlier via email talking about, you know, if I was preparing for the Tokyo Olympics, and I know the Tokyo Olympics has now been cancelled and it's going to be next year, kind of what do you do? And I think that kind of brings us really nicely into this next bit. Some of the organizations we've been talking to over the last few weeks are still focused on a goal that was right for yesterday, but isn't right for today, isn't right for now, given that everything's changed. And I think what's really important is provided this kind of bit about certainty. You know, leaders, whether it be Jobs and Dyson or Scott and Edmondson, kind of provided this vision of the future that people could get engaged with. And then the details come behind it to eliminate as much uncertainty as possible. And that's what I want to try and pick up in this next bit, really. And I'll go back to the sporting example. So in 1998, we came back from the World Championships, having done horribly again. And Martin, our crew coach, did a fantastic job of starting the road of certainty for us, because we were thinking, my God, where do we go now? What do we do? Are we going to qualify for the Olympics? You know, what the hell's happening? And we had a number of meetings where we worked out actually what do we want to achieve, and what we came up with was very simple. We wanted to win. You know, we didn't want to get silver or bronze medals or qualify for the final. We just wanted to win. And we started talking to other people about this goal we had, and they said, "You're crazy. There's no way you can do it." So we thought, "Oh, we quite like that. We'll call it our crazy goal." And we then came up with a whole load of detail that sat beneath it. What are all the measures that need to be in place? The concrete detail measures that show we're capable of winning. And I think in this changing environment, whether you've got a 3-year, a 5-year, a 10-year vision for your business, for your team, whatever it is, it seems that very few of those are totally relevant for today. And being willing to come back and go, okay, for the next 3 months, for the next 6 months, what is the goal? What's the, whatever you want to call it, the vision, the crazy goal in this kind of VUCA environment? As things are changing, we've got to be adapt and change the focus for the business that's relevant to provide certainty for people. And then underneath that, you've got the kind of control bit. What are the areas you can control? There's loads of stuff out there you can't control, but what are the bits you can control that you can work on? And then that takes you down to the everyday bit. And for us, the everyday bit, you know, each session going out on the water, okay, so UT2 is a set heart rate at a certain distance, working on certain things. And there was a lot of certainty about what we had to do in order to achieve the end goal that we were trying to achieve. And I think very often in organizations, we set visions, goals, crazy goals, whatever they are, for some time in the future, and we expect people to get on and do it. And there are some milestones and markers. Sales teams are pretty good at having kind of regular milestones, you know, measures every month or whatever it may be. Tech dev teams are actually really good at kind of the daily huddles, scrums, you know, whatever they may be, where they're going, right, today, what are we going to do? And there's a huge amount of planning and certainty that goes into it. And in times of huge change like this, providing the certainty, putting detailed plans together where people can take, let's say for the next 3 months, the goal is this. What does that mean to me today? What does it mean now? Providing the certainty, the clarity around that is really important. And so that people know, right, today, rather than worrying about all this stuff today, I've just got to concentrate on this 1, 2, 3 things that I'm trying to do. This week, I've got this number of defined tasks I'm trying to work on. And leading through uncertainty is providing clarity, going through the different goal levels, and so the kind of whole difference, from the crazy goal through the concrete, the areas you can control, dragging people away from the stuff they can't control, and going, what can you control? And then the clarity around today, this week, what are we going to do? And so often organizations, goal setting and the whole planning is time consuming, and frankly, it's not really my bag. I don't enjoy doing it. I'm not sure I'm that good at it, but there are times where we just have to do it. And times of uncertainty and change are times where we have to do it. Jamie?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the temptation right now in terms of change is almost to panic and do things too quickly. And actually there's a discipline for a leader around going, okay, let's slow it down. Let's take the time to create a really clear plan. In sports psychology, we used to talk about creating the future from the future, that sense of creating the known. So creating that space when the temptation is actually just to do stuff, I think is really important.
And it'd be great if, in the question box again, it'd be great to know how many of you have got, new short-term plans, whether it be 3 months, 6 months, whatever the time frame is. And one of the big house builders we're working with, someone I did a 2-day workshop with them last week, I think it was about, so much of it was about getting into the detailed planning, because they didn't want to get to the place where 9 weeks into this 3 months, they're going, oh, well, we're actually 3 weeks behind. They've actually, slowing down to plan in advance is really important. And we got some questions here on the worksheet to kind of help guide you through kind of very simple, straightforward, what is your aspirational? Wouldn't it be amazing if, and is it aspirational? Is it aspirational? Is it something that people can look at and go, yeah, that's pretty cool. I would like to, I want to get involved in that. Or is it a simple profit number where people are going, I've got more important things to worry about than profit at the moment? What's the aspirational bit of it? How clear are the concrete measures? And then, how clear are people on the everyday life? Some food for thought there. This is where you provide clarity. This is where you provide certainty for people. It's really important to get right. The next bit that I want to go on and look at is the bit about conversations. So, as I said earlier, the leadership teams that are gone silent, people fill the void with their own stories. Providing good, clear communication is incredibly important. It's really important. And as a leader, we know it's impossible not to communicate. Whatever you say or leaving silence, you're communicating in some form. So improving our communication skills, our ability to have high performance conversations is really important. And we got some really simple kind of structure around this, which works, frankly, if you're sat around a boardroom table, you've got a virtual board meeting on Zoom, or it's a one-to-one conversation with somebody you're talking to. Because in its essence, if you kind of think about the way communication works, business isn't just an aggregation of the communication. If you take away the office space and everything else and all the rest of it, it comes down to the quality of the conversations. If as leaders you improve the quality of your conversation, output improves. Simple, straightforward. So we got these 5 Ps, and as I say, they're simple, they're straightforward, theoretically really, really easy,
harder
to do. And how good are we at kind of really at doing them? So the first P is about when we are approaching an individual, we're going to Zoom them, Teams them, whatever it may be, call them, whether it be a group of people, how clear are we on the purpose? And there are really 3 bits that we need to think about in terms of purpose. The first one is, what am I trying to achieve from this? And that might be me calling Jamie and just dumping a whole load of stuff, getting off my shoulders, dumping on. That might be great for me. It's probably not so good for him, and probably not good for the business either. So the second bit, so if it's kind of a, what's the purpose for me? What's the purpose for Jamie? If it's about Jamie and I, slagging off somebody else, it might be good for us, but it's not good for the business. So thinking about the purpose, the 3 bits: for me, for the people we're communicating, and more widely in the business. Is the purpose of this to make the boat go faster, to make our individual and our collective boats go faster? If not, it may be better not to communicate or change how you're going to communicate. Think about the purpose very clearly. Second bit, kind of preparation or pre-work. So, clearly with, normal meetings, you get sent a slide deck before a paper to read, and clearly we're all fantastic at doing the preparation. So there's that kind of bit of preparation. But also, I know that if I am wanting to talk to Jamie, kind of doing a bit of preparation for that, of thinking, so I've got this issue that I'm trying to deal with. So, Jamie and his wife are sharing childcare. They're both trying to work full time, look after 2 kids. My first question to Jamie every morning is, did your two-year-old let you sleep? What kind of state are you going to be in today? Actually,
did last night.
The situation that other people might be in, so we can go in with kind of empathy to make sure that conversation works as well as possible. Trying to put ourselves in their shoes, kind of at the start of a conversation, is really important. So kind of the preparation, pre-work, get ready. Think about how where other people are kind of mentally, so you can have a good conversation. The third P, kind of pretty simple and straightforward. Third P, kind of the process. What kind of process are we going to follow? And as I say, whether a group of people or individuals, actually, how are we going to open up the topic? How are we going to work out what the best way forward is, and then kind of prioritize what it is? Kind of simple steps, and kind of opening up. I love it when I'm in a meeting or a conversation and someone says, "Oh, that's a really good question," because I've really made them think. So for me, the ability to ask good questions and open things up before helping people close them down is really important. So, how good are we at all of those? The next P is about kind of reviewing performance. How have we performed in that meeting, and whether we kind of hang up and go straight on to the next thing, or whether we just have a few minutes thinking, how well did that land? How well was I able to put myself in their shoes before we started? Was the purpose of that really clear, and did I achieve it? How well did I enable them to kind of prioritize what's most important and us to reach agreement moving forward? Or am I just going to have the same quality conversation a number of times today and in the coming weeks? If I want to improve the organizational and the individual output, how do I get better? And we've got 3 really simple performance review questions. What worked well? What wasn't so good? How do I make sure I'm better tomorrow or next time? Really, really simple. And then the 5th and final P is about kind of follow-up. What's the post-conversation follow-up? This meeting with kind of the house builder last week, about a lot of it was about kind of getting clear on the plan, and then execution of the plan. And there was talk about accountability and what happens if people don't deliver. And then it comes down to the lady running the organization about actually, what is the follow-up? What happens if people aren't delivering? What happens if people are? And how are things followed up? If Jamie and I are having a conversation about some stuff that needs to be done, do we just leave it there, or do we follow up and go, how are you getting on with this? What's working? What's not? Have you delivered on this? With all the programs we run, we got kind of face-to-face or virtual workshops, and then we always have momentum sessions afterwards to help people with the execution. It's so easy not to do stuff very often, and the post-conversation follow-up is, takes you steps forward. Jamie?
And the thing I like about that, Ben, is so the emotional bit at the start in terms of helping people to surface their feelings and what the beliefs might be is actually the softer part of leadership. And whereas the post-conversation follow-up is the harder follow-through bit, and our position is you need both. It's not an either or, it's an and. You need to kind of have the softer bit to get people to look forward, but then you need to have the kind of the edge bit about how are we moving forward, how are we progressing, how are we creating boat speed. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And then, so again, on the worksheet, there are some kind of questions for you to go through to help you kind of with your clarity. What are the bits you're best at? We've all got certain strengths. How aware are you of your strengths when it comes to communication? How aware are you of your weaknesses? And if you had to pick one thing to improve, on the calls you got later on this morning, this afternoon, what would it be? Simple. Next bit, Jamie, for you, kind of exciting others. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, thank you. So we've explored change and how to get on the front foot and some strategies around really getting on the front foot. Second piece is how do you turn those ideas into a clear plan, linking the everyday to the kind of the end piece, and about resetting potentially around this current period of time, next 3 to 6 months. Then the whole sense of how you have really good communication and conversations. Last piece, I think, weaves these ideas together in terms of how do you excite and energize others. And we've kind of arranged it around, we think that there are 3 key ingredients which make that difference. Snappily arranged around the mnemonic row, which obviously is from our background. And I'm going to talk through them one by one. So number 1, in terms of exciting others to high performance, we believe leaders need to be real. So the importance of being authentic and becoming aware of and acknowledging feelings, how people are feeling about things, what might be people's concerns, how do we help pivot to a new future? Because remember, that is the energy which will drive future progress. That sense of being real is really important. Without it, people don't talk about their feelings. It's like squeezing down on a balloon. It will pop out in resistance in other ways if we don't talk about it, if we're not real in terms of what we're feeling and what the beliefs are that might be driving that. Second piece is actually slightly more logical, which is we believe that leaders need to organize their people to excite them to high performance. That whole piece about logically organizing ourselves around new goals, thinking about what the crazy goal is, how are we going to measure that, what are the control areas we need to focus on, what does that mean for each person in the team in terms of day-to-day activity, who's going to do what, how will we work together in terms of team roles. All of that piece is an organizational piece, and that's really potent in exciting people. And then the last piece is quite simply knowing why we are doing this. So this is creating the clear reasons. What floats people's boat about this new future? What are all the reasons for me as an individual, as a leader, for my business or my team, and for the people within the team? What are all the whys? What are all the reasons why we want to get on board? So being real, organizing your people, knowing why we're doing that. We talked a bit about being real with that example earlier around getting people together and explaining some of the feelings of dealing with change goals. 2 stories just to illustrate organizing and why. So organizing your people, working with a team, doing bite-sized chunks of sessions around creating crazy goal and a strategy. The first early sessions were around creating the kind of the crazy goal statement that Ben talked about at the top. And one guy said to me, he said, you know what, that's kind of okay, but it's not really that. I'm not really bought into it. It just feels like a slogan. The next subsequent session that we ran with them over 2 or 3 hours was about actually how we're going to measure that. What are the areas we need to focus on? What might that mean for the everyday layers? And he came to me after that session and said, that has dramatically changed things, because I can now see the organization about how we're going to achieve that goal. I am suddenly now massively more excited. And it spoke to his kind of more logical approach, which is kind of a bit left field, but actually organization can excite people because they can see how they're going to contribute. And then the last bit is about why we're doing it. So story there, 15 years ago, working with an organization, they had a plan to grow internationally. The leader of the business, talking to a group of which I was part of, talks about the benefits to the business in terms of growing internationally, cross-cultural workshops, bigger programs, having offices in America, having offices in Australia, being really excited to create opportunities for people. And then he did something really clever. He started to ask questions rhetorically to the audience about, well, what would that mean for you? What would be exciting about that? Could you imagine yourself working in America? Could you imagine yourself working with cross-cultural groups? And then he gave space for people to come up with reasons why they would get excited. So through that process, he'd been real, people had organized, and then we're really clear about why, so we can move forward into the new future. So for us, exciting is those 3 things. Do them well and you'll create fantastic boat speed. We're going to pass back to Ben. You're going to summarize where we've covered so far.
Yeah, and again with exciting others, there's kind of some questions on the worksheet for you to so you can all kind of, you see what the questions are, you can work through them in your own time, and just try to put numbers on how good you think you are, how far down the path are you, is I think a really good exercise. So through this session we've kind of looked at kind of 4 kind of very simple ideas very briefly, and it's about trying to provide more clarity and direction for people in a time of massive change, and we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know when we're all going to be back in offices. We have no idea how things are going to happen. But the more clarity you can provide in this time of unknown, by creating, clear short-term goals. Clear meaning that everybody can recite them, knows what they are, and there's a detail behind them. Clear in terms of how we communicate with people, whether it be informal one-to-one catch-ups, whether it be team on Zoom or whatever platform we're using, and then going through the kind of simple row process to provide the detail and the clarity. And the organization bit is very often one that's forgotten around leadership. People think it's totally about the kind of direction and inspiring, and for so many people it's also about the detail and the organization that sits behind it. So kind of 4 very, very simple ideas, and we've quite a lot of questions have been coming in, so we'll come to those in just a minute. But before we do that, Jamie, do you just want to kind of talk a bit more about our approach to things?
Yeah, so particularly around leadership and support of leaders, we do 4 things when we work with our clients and friends. Number 1, we do what's called 60-minute leadership workouts. We're doing a lot of those right now. It's about helping people as leaders understand and get a sense of their own well-being right now. So how are you doing personally? Secondarily, focusing on what are your business or team needs, and then thinking about what your leadership kind of areas of development are to help lead your teams and business. That flows into one-to-one coaching. Second piece that we do, we've talked about it in terms of the goal setting, is to create crazy and concrete goals for your teams, particularly over the next 3 to 6 months, using virtual workshops, 2 to 3 hour sessions phased over a couple of days to help create that plan in terms of what the opportunities are, what the benefits will be, and having a clear plan in terms of day-to-day through to the end piece. Thirdly, I'm sure there's a cache of great leaders in your business. We run leadership performance programs using virtual methods. Again, 2 to 3 hour sessions, drip fed over 3 to 5 months to help rev up, develop your leaders. And what's key in terms of that piece is leadership challenges, which are business imperative projects, which will really accelerate your progress. And then the last piece is we do webinars. So much like you've had today, we consult with you about what is key content which is pertinent to your culture, to your particular challenges right now, and maybe we can deliver that to kind of larger numbers of people. We've had 350 people on today, which is fantastic. Just a bit of detail about how the leadership performance program looks. There it is, the kind of scaffolding. We would consult and do a diagnostic up front with you to see kind of what's the graphic equalizer of things that you might need. That informs the design. It also informs what would be individual leadership challenges that people can pick up and run with as vehicles to apply their learning. And then there are a mixture of content-based sessions, which are the reds, and then sort of check-in coaching calls, which are in the greens, different content depending on your need. And then the last bit is a podium event where people come back virtually and talk about what they've done, the learnings they've had, and the progress and impact they've had on the business goals. If that is interesting to you, any of those options, we'd love to talk more with you about that. I think we are due to go to questions now. Ben, back to you.
Yeah, so yeah, we're kind of very happy to open up to questions. So if any questions you've got, please kind of keep sending them in. And just kind of while we're kind of waiting for the next one to come up, I'll just kind of reiterate, the book Will It Make the Boat Go Faster is kind of out, and we've got another webinar coming up. We'll send you more information about that. But in terms of questions, so to kind of fully answer Dan's question before about, what if the Tokyo Olympics is cancelled? What do you do? I mean, the simple answer, Dan, is, when things change, we have to set new goals. And, from a sports perspective, it's easy because everybody's in the same situation. Everyone's in the same boat. And everybody is in a situation of going, right, how do we extend this 4-year cycle to a 5-year cycle, knowing that we've got 3 months away from our training centers and all the rest of it? So what can we do? What are the areas that we can control? If we've got a new date, what are the areas we can control? And then let's break it down to the everyday. And, for most businesses, I think it's the same. I think it's, so, okay, we had this goal, that's no longer applicable. So what's the new goal got to be? And is it a short-term goal to get us, to see us kind of through this extraordinary time we're in, and maybe in 6 months things will have settled down, and then we can set a kind of different goal going forward. But as times change, we need to be willing to adapt our goal. If time spans change, we've got to be willing to adapt to it and keep coming back to what can we control. So what does that mean I've got to be doing today and tomorrow? So hopefully that's an answer to your question.
Ben, we've had a question from so I can't see the name. Does the 5 Ps make individual conversations a bit too formal? So what's your thought on that?
So no, I don't think so. I think that if I'm going to call one of kind of the people in my team, before I pick up the phone, why shouldn't I be clear on is the purpose just to have a human catch up? If that's the purpose, that's fine. Or is the purpose to actually kind of discuss a particular thing? To try and be aware and put myself in their shoes, so I know from Leanne's situation where she's kind of living and working at the moment is very different to Tom's situation where he's living and working, and to try and put myself in their shoes before I start a call. Why wouldn't I want to do that? So the structure can be used formally around a meeting table, or can be used kind of in an informal way for one-to-ones and catch-ups. So no, I think, and hopefully it reminds us of different things to just keep improving. If we're not improving the quality of our conversation, business output is probably not going to be improving that much. So I think it works in a formal or informal way.
Nice. I think Leanne has been collating some questions. So Leanne, do you want to come on mic and share some of the questions?
Hello, yes, we've got loads of questions. Thank you, everyone. So you mentioned momentum sessions before when you were going through the program outline, and Neil asks how we run those momentum sessions.
What do you do?
So I think what's key is, first of all, that each person who's on the program has what we would call leadership challenge, which is a business-based kind of leadership project. How they're run is that each person essentially has a slot of time within the whole kind of hour and a half, 2 hours, to do an update of progress in terms of what's been their progress on the challenge, how they applied some of the ideas from the content, what are some of their challenges, and then they get feedback and counsel from their kind of peer group. Everybody gets a sort of time, so it becomes a kind of coaching challenge and support session. So it's in those sessions, there's no content, but they bring the content because that is the update on progress. What's key is that they review, so to the 4th P of the 5 Ps, and they get support and counsel from peers. And it does 2 things. It signposts that everyone is making forward progress. Secondarily, there's a really nice kind of creative tension, might be the word, because some people make more progress at certain points and then less progress. So there's a nice sense of they're making progress, great, I need to keep making progress on mine, through to sometimes there can be somebody else is making more progress than me, I need to kind of up my game. The key piece is they bring their progress on their challenge, they review, they talk about how they've applied the techniques, the Will It Way pieces, and that's how momentum is captured and progressed. There you go. Hopefully that helps.
Cool. Mark asks that given the rapidly evolving environment we are currently working in, it's somewhat inevitable that as leaders we will get some things wrong. How do we learn to accept and embrace that and ensure that our teams empathise with that challenge too?
So, Mark, you're absolutely right. We will get stuff wrong. There's only so much stuff we know, and we will make mistakes. And I think that kind of being transparent and open with people, saying, we thought we were going to do this, we made this decision, actually this is what's happening, so we need to change the decision. I think kind of openness and straightforwardness is pretty important. And in terms of us getting past it, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff we do around kind of bounce back ability and stuff, but we've got to learn from mistakes we make. We've got to learn and go, okay, so with this next decision I'm going to make, what can I you know, what learning can I take from that to apply to this next decision? But frankly, there's no point in beating ourselves up about it, because we've got to keep moving forward to the next thing and try not to make the same mistake. And if we make a number of different mistakes, then that's kind of the way it is. But if we're open and frank and straightforward with people as to why we're making decisions and why we're trying to do certain things, and when things don't go well, go right, and we've got to change, explain, I think would be my view.
I think I did all the detail about being real, to be honest. I mean, there's a thoughtfulness around the population of people you're being real with, but that openness, I think, is necessary. And yeah, we're going to learn. We're going to make mistakes. We need to learn faster to get ahead of the massive amount of change that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Simon asks, any tips on how we can achieve a balance between our need to continue to drive teams to deliver during the current crisis and balance that with the need to be understanding, empathetic and flexible with challenges our people are facing?
So I think that there's balance it's really important to get the balance right. So I mean, Jamie, if I pick on you, you know, Jamie, you know, he's got 2 small children and both he and his wife work full time. You know what, Jamie, you know, there are only certain number of hours in the day, and you know, his situation is different to mine when mine are kind of, my kids are a bit older and I don't need to look after them. So, you know, we've got to be able to get the balance right. And I think the balance, and we've got to do that through individual situations. You know, individuals, we have different situations, different things going on in our kind of family lives that enable us to do different things in a work environment. And I think kind of one-to-one conversations, rather than saying this is the way it must be for everybody, everybody needs an understanding, and the balance will be different for different people.
I would add to Ben's point about the everyday layer. I think there's a fusion between understanding that at a basic level, what's the time commitment that, you know, parents can do to their job when they're looking after children in lockdown, and what's been agreed in terms of the everyday actions. And I think having both of those things in mind when an agreement is made about what we can do means that we can strike that balance about what is acceptable progress. So almost a new normal around acceptable progress is what you can do in 4 or 5 hours rather than what you could do in 8 or 9. And yes, it's still moving us forward. It's still ticking off those everyday things and making an impact on the control layer and towards our goal. But progress is at a different pace from what it was 3-4 weeks ago.
And working people into the ground so they break, so what they produce is poor quality, doesn't help anybody. So the balance has got to be struck.
Similar question from Richard, but a little bit more about leading through change. So in every team, there are those people who thrive in times of change and others who struggle. Do you have any advice on how to approach these people on top of challenging the discomfort?
So I would go, I mean, so if people thrive on change, and yeah, there are personality preferences where people, you know, MBTI would talk about, I think it's ENTPs, they just love difference. So for them, actually what's healthy change is a larger amount than maybe for other people. I think for them, there's something about getting them to think about opportunities and benefits more quickly. I think there's something in terms of being real and in terms of dealing with change, which is back to the kind of one-to-one conversations with those who struggle to really understand, well, what are those struggles? What's the beliefs that might sit behind the feelings that they have around struggling? And how, as leaders, we can help them build different beliefs so that change becomes easier to manage. It's never going to be super easy, but because I mean, particularly right now, it's an extreme situation. But there's some degree of being real and getting under the skin and being empathic of each person in your team and going, do you know what? I know that for somebody that's going to be more difficult and I need to maybe spend a bit more time with them, and that's okay. Because actually when I get them up and running, they add massive value. But everybody will have different kind of thresholds in terms of moving from that second stage, healthy change, to the third stage, which is excessive. And helping understand what the emotions are and the beliefs, I think, is a really powerful thing that leaders can do. Ben, any builds on that?
Yeah, kind of very briefly. I think that very often we focus on the difference rather than the same. And for the people who find change harder, I wonder how much of what they're doing is actually kind of pretty similar. The context might be different. The workplace might be a desk in your bedroom rather than an office, but how much of the job is that much different, I wonder. So, we can get obsessed by looking at all the change and actually helping some people go, well, how much is actually similar? So, looking where people focus.
Cool. Peter Daly, friend of Willett, asks, would you put any limitations on the crazy goal for your team? Obviously, it needs to be stretching, but does it need to be attainable in times like this?
I have an immediate answer, Peter. Very nice to hear from you again. And Peter's based in France, so I'm not going to break into French right now. But for me, there's something about understanding the context of right now, what are the constraints, what we're operating on, and then trying to have that, and then to think about, well, what is still possible, and does that create a sense of excitement? Because actually, even if we do that in these 3 to 6 months, that's really good. And at the same time, it creates a bit of how are we quite going to do that? I think, to some organizations where it's obviously more stretching and testing, we might need to bring the goals in and be a bit less ambitious. But there's still a sense of, in this 3 or 6 months, there's still some amazing things that we could do. The context is different, and is what could be exciting. And yes, there's going to be some moments with that, but then get into the detail of how we might make that happen would be my view. Ben?
Nothing to add.
Very good to hear from you, Peter. Thank you for the question.
A question from Anthony. How do we ensure that our internal business goals are perfectly aligned with our clients' rapidly evolving demands and attitudes?
You take that, Ben.
So I think kind of talking to our clients, talking to people is really important to find out what's happening out there, and so we can get alignment. A kind of assumption is the mother of all mess ups, or whatever the phrase is. I think that actually, I think quite a lot of businesses kind of gone through the first phase of going, oh my God, what the hell is happening? People now seem to be in a kind of second phase of this kind of corona change, where things seem to, for a lot of organizations, things seem to have settled down. They seem to have found a new rhythm, found a new way of working. Don't know how long it's going to go on for, don't know what the third phase is going to look like. But a lot of people have got through the first bit of just trying to work out what the hell's going on. And people seem to have more time to actually kind of discuss challenges, issues. So I think talking to people and finding out, from our clients, what do they need? What are the pain points? What are they struggling with? How can we help them go forward, rather than just making assumptions would be my view.
One other build would be as well, so to Ben and the goal setting thing, how you would measure the next 3 to 6 months. I think there's something for me around each team in the business understanding how they can contribute to that organizational wide number is a really strong way of helping to maintain and ensure a greater rather than less alignment. So we want to be stronger coming out of this. How will we know a revenue target, a well-being target, a number, and there might be a business, a profitability number? Well, how does each team, how might we contribute to that number? Having that conversation is key.
Leanne, have we got time for one final question?
Yes, we've had a couple of people ask a very similar question. So both Mike and Shamil have asked, how do you set a crazy goal with so much uncertainty?
So I think it's got to be fairly short term. I think it's got to be fairly short term, and it's got to be, with the knowledge that, things might change again. But what are the, from what you were trying to do before, and looking at the bit that's known. How much do you know about your situation? How much do you know about your clients? How much do you know about your people? And gathering as much knowledge as you can to then go, okay, well, so what's the destination that, to pick up on the question earlier that Jamie answered about the mix between kind of being ambitious and realistic. So with the data you've got, what do you think now is going to be ambitious and realistic? And just as we set a crazy goal, actually at the end of last year for the next 3 years, it's now totally different. And if things change again, we'll change it again as times change. But having as things change, is working out the next direction for the next phase, and whether 3 or 6 months is too long at the moment. If you want to go shorter, go shorter. But I think having a direction to give people clarity, no matter how long or short, is important.
The goal steers people out of the unknown.
I'm kind of aware it's 12 o'clock. We have taken more time than we planned. It's nice to see so many of you stayed on. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for all your questions. Questions we haven't had time to answer verbally, we will reply to kind of by email in the next day or so. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, we've kind of simple tips and ideas we've been through today. The critical bit is application. So the worksheet is there as, you know, a simple tool to help you apply this stuff, to help you go, okay, so how can I communicate better? How real am I being? You know, how much empathy do I have with people in the team? How well am I bringing them along? How clear have people got around, you know, how much clarity around direction? Application is key. If you would like some help or support with kind of applying these ideas or other ideas, then please let us know. We've been doing lots of leadership workouts with people recently to try and kind of help them through this. If you'd like that sort of support, again, please give us a shout. Thank you all very much for joining us. There will be another webinar we'll be doing next month, and details of that will come out in the next couple of weeks. So from me, thank you very, very much. From Jamie also. Thank you very, very much. There might be a feedback form somewhere as well. Yes, if you can provide some feedback for us, we would love that. So thank you very much. Have good, safe rest of the days and rest of the weeks, and hopefully look forward to having you on in a month's time.